All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm here with Mr. Stephen McCombs. Man, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, man, you're welcome.
You know what's funny is I don't know if you remember this too well, but we met at the Culture of Champions event in Gilbert, I believe. So Josh Tilley put that on, and what I thought was interesting about you is you rode in on the helicopter. You flew with Keaton, the Muscle
Yeah.
Hoskins. So I thought that was super cool. I'd never even seen that before. I mean, them flying in, I'm like, man, this is cool. This is a sweet event. And then you were talking to a lot of people there, but you talked to me too. You're like, hey, what's up, man? Like, who are you? What are you about? And things like that. So I appreciated that about you, and I've been following you on your Instagram since then. So if you guys haven't, find him at Steve Arbitrage. Isn't that where it is?
Yeah, Steve Arbitrage on Instagram. Yep.
Sweet. Well, thank you. I'm excited to hear about your journey, kind of everything that you've done up to this point, and really a few short years is what it seems. So, just kind of starting things off, like, where did you start? Where did you come from? I've heard you say that you've been in the States now for like 9 years. Is that what it is now?
Yeah, I think it's 9 years as of this year. I think this next year, New Year, I think it will be 10 years since I got here. I got here in 2015 is when I got here from Mexico.
Really? So, you grew up
Yeah.
there? You're from there? You
Yep.
were there your
Born
whole
and
life?
raised in Mexico. Yep. And I'm half Mexican, half white. My dad went and retired in Mexico and met a Mexican lady out there, and that's where I'm from. And so I basically grew up in a very Americanized culture in Mexico, and so I just knew the States was where it was at for money and just work, and I just decided to come, honestly, and that's where it all started.
How old were you when you came over, too, by the way? And what maybe led you to making that move?
So I was 19 years old, no, 20 years old, 19, 20 years old. And honestly, my life is very interesting, but I wouldn't say it's super interesting for others, but it's interesting to myself. And I've gone through several phases in my life. In Mexico, I was very young. I was working at a restaurant. I was the bar back. And within 30 days of working at this place, I became the restaurant manager, and from a bar back to a manager in 30 days. And it was all because I just did go above and beyond what I was supposed to be doing. And even my boss was like, what are you doing waiting tables and doing all these other things, or helping with, even if I didn't get paid a tip, I was doing way above and beyond what others would do, even if they were a bar back, and I was doing a bunch of stuff. And so that's where it all kind of started. I used to work when I was a young kid. My dad used to make me work pretty much at his job sites. He was in construction. And so I was always doing stuff, painting houses, doing a bunch of stuff in construction. And so that's where it all kind of started. I started learning how to be a hard worker and going above and beyond. And that all came from my family. My family has always been hardworking. And so that's where it all started in regards to hard work. But once I got to the States, I realized that hard work doesn't mean money. And that's where it all started to change. I realized that people that worked hard don't necessarily make money. They might make enough to survive, but hard work does not always equal money. And that's where I had to kind of break that apart and understand where money comes from, and how to build wealth. And so just to bring it back to you is that's where it all started here in the States.
That's incredible. And so you've been in insurance then, right? Did you start with insurance once you got to the States? I mean, that sounds like that would be a tough transition if you were only
Yeah.
like whatever 20 years old and then trying to start in that business.
Yeah, so it all I wish it started in insurance, but no, so the way it all started with my life journey is I started in sales. Luckily, the first job I got here in the States was I was selling pest control door to door. That was my first reality kick in the face of what real life making money and knocking on doors is. And I'm so glad that was my first job because I would not want to go back to that. I don't know if I would want to go back to knocking doors for 12 hours a day. But that was a great experience for me to understand that money is in sales, and you have to master sales to make money. And so I did that for about 3 to 4 months in California, and I got there a little bit late in the season. The season was already like 2 or 3 months into the pest control kind of like season. Usually it's like from January to like July or August.
Mm-hmm.
I got there like in March. And so most of the guys there already knew what the hell they were doing and were kind of figuring it out. And I got there and I had to basically just figure it out day one. And so I remember the first day that I started knocking on doors, I was shaking. And also my English was not as great because I've been living in Mexico for all my life. So you could tell my accent, and I didn't know sales in English. I knew just how to have conversations in English, but I didn't know how to make sales in English, which was way different. And so I got in, and 3 months later, I caught up to pretty much everyone. And I think I did like 120 accounts or something, 140 accounts within 3-4 months. Made like $35,000 in 3 months, which is crazy because I only came up with pretty much all my savings. I came up with $1,000 to the States.
Wow.
So I made 35 times, 40 times what I initially came up with to the States.
That's crazy. I feel like there's a good theme there that you have too, where even before you came to the States, it's like I've heard it said, like if you're a fry cook right now, be the best one there is. Like
Yeah.
if you're sweeping floors, like make sure that it's just pristine, right? You have that work ethic, and I'm sure that kicked you in the face too, of just like you're doing sales. It's hard to believe that you'd even have an accent. Like now you can't tell at all, but obviously years of doing it and acclimating to that. I mean,
Yeah.
so that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was very interesting. I'm glad it was my first job because I literally had no one here. Like, I didn't have a family that would take me in. I didn't have anyone that would just be like, hey, just live with me in case you go homeless tomorrow. They was just like, figure it out. And so after I did the pest control thing, I had some friends here in Utah, and I realized that in California, I wouldn't be able to survive just because it was so expensive. I mean, $35,000 was so much money to me. And at that time, I mean, just with all of my expenses and everything, I only had probably 10, 15,000 after I did all that work. And so I needed to figure out a place where I could go live. And friends of mine told me to come to Salt Lake, and I just came out here, and I basically lived in an apartment with like a 3-bedroom apartment with like 15 guys. My rent was $200 a month, but I was living in a room with like 6 guys on the floor, and so it's crazy how things can quickly change if you put your mind to it, and you start reading. I think everyone should read books. Especially Rich Dad, Poor Dad. If you have no clue what the hell you're doing in life and you want to get out of your shitty situation, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and really pour your soul into that book and read it with determination and have a understanding that your situation right now is probably because your mind is not in the right place. I could go homeless tomorrow. I've always said this. If I went homeless tomorrow, if I lost everything, if the bank came and took my house, my cars, my money, I would be a millionaire within 1 to 2 years. It's all in your mind, and it's all what you know and have knowledge of. And if you don't have the knowledge, you're never going to make it.
That's huge. And I've heard so many people say that book in particular. I mean, I would advocate for reading too, but definitely I need to read that book again. I mean, I think there's a lot of gems in that book. And I like how, I mean, there's that saying of like burn the boats. And I feel like, I mean, you didn't even have that option. You just had nothing to even start with, it seemed like. So you came over here and you had nothing to lose. And I think that's huge. It's not like you would have wished for that. but sometimes we can get really comfortable if we're born in the States. I was born in the States, so
Yeah.
it's almost like, oh, I have these other paths that aren't as risky. It's a little more comfortable, but it seems like for you, you were just clawing and fighting to find something that worked.
Yeah, honestly, it's so funny because when I got to Utah, my first job uh that I got when I got to Utah is I didn't have a job for like 2 3 weeks when I got here because I was like, I don't know. I went to look for jobs, I couldn't find anything, no one was hiring. And I asked my friend, I was like, hey, do you know where I could work? And he's like, there's a restaurant here. You were in restaurants, try to work at a restaurant. So I went in and I did I was a busboy for one day, and they fired me the next day. And they said they basically it was a Taiwanese or something restaurant, and the owner was like, "No, I don't like you. I didn't like your work. Have a good day." And I was like, "What? Okay, sounds good." So I basically went back home. I didn't have a job again, and so I found another guy that found a job for me at a call center, and that was my second job in Utah, was a call center. And I had to get on a train about 45 minutes on the train at 5 a.m. and get on the bus and then go to the call center, walk about a mile from the bus stop to the call center. And I did that for about 6 months. And while I was doing that, I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad nonstop. And literally during calls, like in middle of calls that because we couldn't have our phones out, so I was like, well, I won't have my phone out, but I'll have my book out. And so I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad while I was doing these calls at the call center, while I was waiting for calls. And I read the first one, the second one, the third book. He has like 3 different books within that like Rich Dad Poor Dad family. And I read them all. And then at the end of the third book, I basically went up to my manager and I said, hey, I quit. I'm getting out of here. And so that was, again, I burned the bridges. And I don't know if it was God or energy or what the hell it was, but I found a job as a insurance agent, insurance salesman. And that's when I got into insurance.
That's incredible. And
Yep.
so your early 20s, I'm assuming. Um, and that's interesting how you've made that transition. You were just ready to move on. Like you were ready to end that job that you had that you didn't like. You knew it wasn't going to get you to where you wanted to be. Obviously, after reading from Robert Kiyosaki, knowing what's out there, it sounds like. So, and you did pretty well in insurance, right? I mean, are you're still in it? Do you do
Yeah.
it kind of part time
Yeah.
or
So
full time?
yeah, it's more of a full-time thing. That's my main source of income. Um, the thing with what I would tell your viewers is look at your surroundings, look at what's around you and who's around you, and then ask that person that is next to you how much they make. Um, and you will quickly realize that you are probably making about what they're making or less. And that happened to me at the call center. I saw a lady, she had been working for the company for 20 years. And I asked her how much she was making, and she said $16 an hour. And at the time, I was making $11 an hour. And so I realized that if I worked there 20 more years, I would go up to $16 an hour. And so once I realized that, I said, this is not for me. I need to get out of here. And I changed my environment. And we hear this all the time: change your environment, change who you're with, who you're standing next to, who your 5 friends are. And if you can't change that, stay the fuck away from your friends that are making nothing out of their life. Be a lone wolf for a while until you can upgrade your lifestyle. And that's what I've done. I became a lone wolf until I could upgrade my lifestyle. And that's basically what I've done. Now I have friends that make millions of dollars a year. And so, because at the time when you're increasing your lifestyle, increasing your earnings, sometimes you can't find people in that middle ground. If you can, amazing. But sometimes it's so hard because most of the guys that are doing it are also going through the same phase that you are. And it's very hard to find that middle ground people. And so that's when I say just suck up and grind. And that's what it's all about, is just grinding through until you get to that point where you hang out with people that have already made it.
That is golden. I hope people rewind that if you missed it. Take notes on this. That's huge. And the a thing that I love about podcasting too is meeting with someone like you or other people where it's like you don't even know what's possible a lot of the times, because if you grew up and all that you see is like you have to, go to school if you want to get a good paying job or whatever, and you don't even see what's out there, what's possible. So thank you for bringing that up. I love that. That's valuable. And obviously something that's very interesting about you, about what your social media is about too, on top of insurance, is Airbnb. So how did you make that transition, or how did you know that that's even what you wanted to do?
So again, it's not really what I know. It's just getting out there and doing it. I've owned multiple companies that have failed. I've owned things that people didn't even know I did. And I started an e-com store. I started a drop shipping store. I started a credit repair business. I started an Airbnb business. I started an insurance business. I've done it and been at it for a while now. I mean, I've tried everything, and that's the difference between me and other people that can't make it, is because they think about it and they think about it and they think about it and they never do anything. And so I don't think about it. I just do it. And so that's the difference between people that achieve things and the people that keep thinking they want to achieve things. You can't keep thinking about it. Think about it once, twice, see if that's something you want to do. And if you don't want to do it, you always can decide to not do it within a year or two of doing it. And that's what I always recommend. Now, obviously, there's always a caveat there. It's you always have to be careful and not do a scam, or don't get scammed somewhere, because a lot of people, that's what happens, is they try to partner up with someone, or like, hey, like I'm gonna pay this guy online and he's gonna do everything for me and I just have to pay him. And it's like, no, there's a reason why they're successful and they're taking your money and putting it somewhere else. It's like, no, you have to figure things out on your own. You have to do it on your own and figure things out. Now, again, you could pay someone to help you. You could pay someone to teach you something like mentorship or a course, but always, I think the biggest thing is just do shit, right? So just do it. Like Nike says, just do it, right? It's all about action. Just do it. If you want to do a business, if you want to do a podcast, if you want to do whatever the hell you want to do, if you want to do an Airbnb, just do it. Worst case, what's the worst case scenario, right? So I've always said this to everyone around me. It's like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Okay, you go get some debt, you go get the Airbnb, it doesn't work out, you fail, you hurt your credit for a bit, and you learn something. Okay, did you die? No. Did you go to jail? No. Did you break the law? No. So why are you so worried? Everything comes down to, well, if I fail, people will think I'm a failure. And it's like, okay, so now you care only about what others think and not what you want for your own life. It all comes down to that. So if you're okay with that, if you're okay with saying you only care about what others think, then don't hate yourself when you get to 60 or 70 years old and you're working at Walmart. That's the reality. Like, yeah. That's the thing, is you need to accept and be brutally honest with yourself, right? I'm brutally honest with myself. I'm not the smartest man on earth. I'm not a hedge fund owner. I'm not a computer scientist. That's not what I do. I'm a grinder and I'm a worker, and I find ways to arbitrage things, right? That's why my name is Steve Arbitrage. I arbitrage everything I can. If I can work 10 hours a week and make $40,000 a month, I prefer that than working 80 hours a week and making $20,000 a month. like, why would I work more to make less? Right? And no, I'm going to try to work less and make more for that time that I'm working.
Mm. I like that a lot, and that's what's interesting about you. So it seems like it's not even that you found, Airbnb arbitrage, and that's what fit you, and that was just perfect for you. It's not like insurance was just because it was perfect for you, but like you made it happen. You went and tried a lot of different things that you thought about. There was probably a little delay. There wasn't much delay between thinking about it and then going and doing it instead of being a entrepreneur. Because you could be at some call center still and think, oh, it would be cool if I did real estate, or it would be cool if I got into Airbnb because I see it online. So I respect that about you. I think that's important, and I hear that a lot from people that we all would admire, is that there's just a little gap between like, hey, I have this idea, sounds crazy, but I want to go do it.
I'll tell you this, the way I did the Airbnb business, I went to a meeting. I talked to a guy at the meeting that I didn't really have a friendship with, but I knew he was a very successful agent, right? An insurance agent. He knew that I was a very successful insurance agent. I was talking to him and I was like, hey, have you heard of this other business, Airbnb arbitrage, blah, blah. He's like, actually, I have. I've been studying this for a while. I want to do it. I'm like, okay, let's meet up on Monday. And if you're serious about this, let's buy a course on Monday to start doing the business. We met on, that was on Friday. He texted me on Sunday and he's like, hey, just want to make sure if this is real, like, are we going to do this? And I was like, yeah, I have it planned here on my calendar. I'm going to go to your office at 3 p.m. on Monday. We went on Monday. We met on Monday in his office. We bought the course. We started studying the course for 2 weeks and had our first Airbnb 3 weeks after we first met.
That's insane.
Like,
Yeah, I
that
think
started. And now within 2-3 years that we started that, our business generates $1.5 million a year.
that is crazy. So how many units now do you have? I mean, is it
24.
how many?
24.
Wow. And that's insane. So you started with obviously arbitrage, and if people don't know what that means, so you go to the landlord that's doing a rental, that has a rental property, and you ask him, hey, can I pay you the rent, but then you take it and Airbnb it, correct?
Yeah.
So you started with that. Do you own units now with your partner? Are you looking to expand and buy more or buy some, or how does that work now?
Yeah, so it has evolved over time. Our initial plan, again, the thing that works so well with my partner is we are not talkers. Like, right now we're doing a flip, and he called me up one day and he's like, hey, I have this contractor that wants to do a flip. He wants to partner up with us. He's going to send us some deals, and are you in? And I was like, if you trust him, I trust you. Let's do it. And I think 2 weeks later, I went to go see some properties with the contractor. We went under contract, and now we're almost done with the flip. We're probably going to sell it this month. So
That's crazy.
it's just like getting and doing it. Now, is this flip going to be profitable? Probably not. We're probably just going to be even, or we might just make like 5-10K. Was it worth it? Not really. I'm not going to make a lot of money, but one thing I can tell you is I learned a shit ton of things. And one thing I learned was I probably don't want to become a flipper, right? I probably don't want to do more flips. And what does that mean? That means that I learned a lesson. And that's one thing that most people never learn. They never learn a lesson because they always just want to do something. They don't do it. And so what I did with my partner is I told him, look, hey, dude, there is a chance we lose money on this. There's a chance you lose money on any business, but that doesn't mean you're not going to do it. That just means like, hey, there's this risk, right? There's risk with everything. There's risk with Bitcoin and stock market and everything. But one thing after talking about this with my partner, I'm like, hey, dude, I think from now on, we might not want to flip houses. We want to own an asset. But let's say, why don't we just, instead of buying and flipping houses, why don't we just put the profits of our company into Bitcoin?
Yeah. And you're huge on Bitcoin too.
Yeah.
I've seen that. You're one of the people I always see that on my feed, and it gets me looking into it obviously too. And I don't have any in Bitcoin right now, which you're gonna laugh at that. You're gonna be like, dude, I've been telling you because you have.
No,
Um,
I mean it's so one thing with Bitcoin is there's a saying, uh, you get Bitcoin at the price you deserve.
mm. So
And
for a guy
so,
like me, that's why when it goes to like 120, I'll be like, I'm finally jumping on, and then you're like,
yeah,
I've been telling you since it was 80K.
yeah, exactly. So
Mm.
that's the thing. I got Bitcoin at the price I deserved. I started buying Bitcoin. So I started buying Bitcoin initially when it was at 3,000.
No
That's when I
way.
started buying. But I didn't buy heavy. I was buying like 100, $200, $500 here and there. I sold it at like 16,000 just because I thought it was a scam, like a pump and dump. So I was like, yes, I made $3,000, right? And I was broke at the time. I didn't have any money when I was buying that. So I didn't understand the technology. I didn't look into it. I didn't do anything with it. I just bought it as a pump and dump, buy, sell high, and that's it, right? Well, I had another business, and I had a partner in that business, and he had all his money in Bitcoin. And the crazy thing is, I try to analyze things. I might be a little slow, or yeah, I try to analyze things a lot more than most people, and I overanalyze things. And so one time I was with my partner at his house in California, and he shows me his crypto portfolio, and it had like $500,000 in Bitcoin. And I asked him how much money he has in his checking account, and he said $3,000. And I was like, what the actual hell is wrong with you? Are you absolutely stupid or what? And so he just said like, no, dude, you need to understand it, blah, blah. I was like, okay. He didn't really tell me what to study or what to do. He was like, you just need to look into it. And so that's when I started looking into it. Again, same thing with Robert Kiyosaki, studying the rich people, doing the same thing. I did the same thing with Bitcoin, right? Once I understood it, that I was doing a challenge with Keaton, the muscle. He made me lose 35, 40 pounds from January to like March or something in like 3 months. So during that time, I was working out 4 hours a day. And I was, during the 3 hours of cardio that I was doing, I was studying Bitcoin 3 hours a day for 3 months. Okay.
Wow.
Every single day. Every day I was studying Bitcoin 3 hours a day for 3 months, 4 months almost. Once I got done with that, I went heavy. And so I started buying Bitcoin heavy around $50,000. Okay.
Wow.
And so again, it all comes down to you get Bitcoin or any asset really. I mean, Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, if you didn't understand it, you wouldn't have bought, right? You're like, oh, this is dumb. This is a fad. This is whatever, right? If you would have bought Apple, if you understood Apple or Amazon in 2008, you would have bought the dip, right? But most people got scared and sold it because they didn't understand it. Same thing happens with Bitcoin and houses and businesses, everything, right? If you don't understand it, you're going to have paper hands and sell.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we're on the topic. And you don't have to get too in the weeds or anything. Don't like get too detailed if you don't want to. But what about Bitcoin? Like, what do you know about it that other people probably don't know?
Hmm. So, I mean, again, I'm not a super smart person, right? I'm not going to be telling you like about the technology and the block size and all these little intricacies. What I can tell you is how money works. And the way we are taught to understand money is that the dollar is king, right? There's nothing better than the dollar, so you hold your dollars and save your money. Well, that might have been true back in 1930 when the dollar was backed with gold, right? If you had $1, we had $1 of gold. If we had $10, we had $10 in gold. Well, once that didn't happen anymore and World War II had to be funded, we depegged the dollar off the gold standard. And what that means is basically we can print as many dollars as we want to pay whatever we want. So what does the dollar have in value? Well, not much. It's just a piece of paper. And if you study the dollar over the past 30, 40 years, your dollar has lost 99% of its value, right? So if you tell me what is best, to hold your money in a piece of paper or hold it in gold, I would tell you probably hold it in gold. If you're going to hold your money, hold it in gold, right? Because gold doesn't lose its value. It stays pretty consistent with inflation, right? Same thing with gold. Gold is not going up in value, right? It's just going up in dollars terms. But if the dollar is going down, it's just holding its value. Same thing with home properties. A lot of people are like, well, buy real estate. Real estate is king. It's like, well, yes, if you're in the right area at the right time, at the right perfect moment, you buy your real estate. But what happens with real estate and what they're looking into it more and more as time passes is they're realizing that real estate has held its value relatively the same as gold. So if you could have bought, let's say, a piece of property for 500 ounces of gold back in, let's say an example, I don't know, 30 years ago, you can still buy that property with the same 500 ounces of gold now, because gold has gone up with time and your dollar has gone down. But you can't buy the property for the same amount in dollars terms, okay? Because your dollar is going down. So that's all you have to really understand about Bitcoin. Now, the difference with Bitcoin and gold, that's why the people compare it with Bitcoin and gold, is the reason why Bitcoin is way better than gold is because I can put $300 million on a USB drive and leave the United States and use that money wherever I want, okay? If you had $300 million in US dollars and you tried to move that to France, good luck with that. If you had $300 million in gold bars and you wanted to move to Nigeria, good luck with that. They're not going to let you leave. They're not going to let you leave with $300 million in gold. So that's why Bitcoin is better than gold. It's because you can move it and transact with it without having to deal with governments.
That is so interesting. And I think I'm going to give myself the action step to deep dive more into it instead of just seeing what's online and seeing, oh, invest in it or whatever, pros and cons of it. Thanks for sharing that.
I mean, the thing is, with Bitcoin is the best way to study it. There's tons of books on it. If you want a book to read and understand how money really works, read The Bitcoin Standard. It's a book that was created in 2014, and it has basically predicted everything that is going to happen with Bitcoin. Even the creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, he basically predicted that if everything goes to plan, Bitcoin could potentially be worth anywhere between $15 to $20 million a coin in the next 20 to 30 years.
That is bananas, and I don't think anything else could compare to that. Then say S&P, that's a good benchmark. S&P 500 is a good benchmark, but I don't think anyone is expecting it to reach anything like that.
I was a big S&P 500 investor. That's where I had all my money. And once I studied gold, I still have a lot of money in S&P. But right now, 50% of my investments go into Bitcoin, and 50% of my other investments go into the S&P and the NASDAQ.
That is crazy. Well, I mean, you are diversified, and I would encourage anyone listening to go to your Instagram, because I know you post a lot of good things there, kind of some of the day-to-day and things like that too. And you referenced it a little earlier. I did want to talk to you about that, because following you, I've seen the fitness challenge you did, or really the transformation you went through, and being around some of these huge hitters too. Andy Elliott, Keaton, the Muscle Hoskins, like Rob Bailey, I think, and probably a lot of other people I'm forgetting. Like, what happened there? How did you get into that situation where you went through the transformation? Like, have you had a big change in mindset recently too over the years, and just like getting in with that crowd?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest part was just, I think, um, understanding that these people are also human. I think most people see like famous people online and they put a big like aura around them and they're like perfect people. Um, I think the biggest thing for me, the biggest transformation was just understanding that they are also human. They have gone through their same issues. They've gone through the issues that you have and all these different things, right? They've had experiences, maybe more experience than that you have because they've had that fame. They've had the things that they've gone through. Um, One thing that I can tell you is that they do think differently. And that has been the biggest thing for me is understanding the way that these people think and how I can try to think similarly to them. Okay. It's so interesting. Keaton, specifically Keaton, he's doesn't give a rat's ass about anything. Like, if you like, it's so crazy that he's just such a wild guy, and he really doesn't care what you think and what others think. And that was a big eye opening for me. One time, I before I bought my own Corvette, I rented a Corvette, and I. This never happens, but when you rent something, I don't know why it happens, but you hit something or whatnot. I was going down the freeway and a boulder just like popped up and hit the
Oh
car,
no.
scratched the whole front bumper. And I was on my way to meet with Keaton that day and to his house. And I got there and I was all stressed. I was worried. I was like, dude, I fucked up. This happened. And he was like, chill out, dude. And I was like, dude, don't you see what happened? Like, I was all stressed. I was overthinking. And he's like, okay, like, it happened. And I was like, yeah, exactly. It happened. Like, I need to fix this. I need to go call someone. And he's like, no, man, like, it happened. Like, there's nothing you can do to change what happened. Now you have to deal with it, but don't over stress about stupid shit that you can fix with money. And I was like, that really hit me. And I was like, what? He's like, again, he's like, what's the worst thing that can happen? I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm probably going to have to take out like $4 or $5 to fix this. He's like, you have the money? I'm like, yeah. It's like, okay, so why are you worried? I was like, oh shit. Okay. Well, yeah, that's true. But still, shouldn't I be like, and it's just changing your mentality of like, stop worrying about stupid shit. Stop worrying about stupid things that just you overthink, and in reality, it's just as simple as working a little bit harder that month to pay off that bill.
I
You
love
know?
that. Yeah, and I mean, it seems like you know a lot of these people personally too. And what other ways do you think, like, what separates them from just anyone else that like wants to start a business or wants to be successful? Like, why do you think? What are some maybe qualities or things that they do that have
Hmm.
helped them get to that level of success versus someone else that's just wanting to get there?
The simple answer is they're insane. That's the simple answer is they truly are crazy for their craft. They are like, I met Andy Elliott, and the way he is online is who he is in person. He does not fake it. He is insane. And so when people see this fake Instagram, they're like, oh, that's not who they are. It's like, no, these guys are actually insane for their craft. Like Keaton jumping off the helicopter into his pool. You don't know how many documents and lawsuits and all this crazy shit from the area he lives, he's received. And what does he say? Send more. He doesn't care, right? So when I get worried about a scratch on a Corvette that I rented, he's not even worried about other things that are way crazier that have way more repercussions to what he's doing. But again, it's because these people that are in these positions actually don't care. And again, they take action. I mean, I've seen Keaton ever since he did Limitless. He's started multiple companies, and they take action. It's like he knows that 20 out of those 21 companies he started are going to fail, right? But that one that does really well is going to make up for all the ones that failed. Okay. But he knows that he's going to learn a lot. And that's the thing with Keaton. I meet with Keaton once or twice a month now. And one thing that I have seen is basically, one, they take action. They have a lot of knowledge because, one, they have had a lot of mistakes that they've done over time. They've made a lot of mistakes, so they learn from those mistakes and they don't repeat those mistakes. But they're constantly learning, man. They're constantly learning. Like, there's literally no time that I haven't seen that Keaton asks me questions sometimes about like Bitcoin and about other things that he's like, hey, dude, I don't know something about this. It's like, it's not just a one-way street where he's giving me all the knowledge. He's asking me for things that he doesn't know about, right? And so that's what I've seen with very successful people that I've met, is they're always learning about new things.
Wow, that is so valuable. And being a lifetime learner too, I think, is huge. And I've had to think about that a lot too. The idea that, like, whether you're stressed about making ends meet and paying like $1,000 credit card bill versus like, hey, where am I going to get $1 million to, I don't know, buy this property or do this business or whatever? Like, you're going to be stressed about something, might as well, make it something that matters. Like, yep. Thinking a lot bigger, that helps me think about that. Like, dude, there's levels to it. You can be stressed about this. Something that doesn't matter. Even though you think a scratch on the Corvette, I'd probably be pretty stressed out about that too. But that's just a mindset shift.
Yeah. It's all about mindset, man. Honestly, like, I know people say like mindset. It is a little like, it is. I feel like people say it too much, but it is about mindset. It's not all, but it's definitely about mindset. I think there's definitely things that go into it. If you want to be successful, change your mindset, number one. Change your environment, number two. Change the people you surround yourself with. If the people you surround yourself with are making more money than you and you look up to them, then you're in the right place, okay? If you don't look up to your friends and they're drinking on weekends and you don't want to be there, there's no reason why you should be there. They're not forcing you. They're not putting a gun to your head and telling you have to be there. You don't have to be there. You can be on your own, right? If you like them as people, yeah, you can hang out with them once a month and just be with them and hang out with them, but don't be with them every day. Don't if they don't put you in the right place mentally, don't do it. And that's one thing that I would change, is change your environment. I see this all the time. I mean, just because you work at Walmart doesn't mean you have to stay working at Walmart, right? You have to pay your bills. I had to pay my bills when I was working at the call center. I was making $11 an hour. That doesn't mean I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and then quit after a week. No, I paid my bills, paid my car payment, and then after I had some savings, I was like, okay, I need to better my life, and this is not the place to do that. I need to jump and get the hell out of here. And so I found something that could potentially help. Now, was there risk? Of course there was. I could have not passed the test to become an insurance agent. I could have gotten fired after a week of being an insurance agent. There's so many freaking risks. If I would have started the Airbnb business and it would have failed within a month, that's the risk. I lost 15, 20 grand. Like, there is no thing that you can do with no risk. Right now, if Bitcoin goes down to $20,000, $15,000, I would lose millions of dollars, right? So it's like, there's always risk. But you need to look at the potential. You need to look at the risk reward curve. And it's like, okay, if the risk is zero, the reward is zero. There's no reward. You're going to stay at the place that you hate for the rest of your life and have no reward. Now, if you, let's say you take the next step and find another job that pays you a little bit better, yes, the risk reward curve goes up a little bit, but it's still shit. You need to go over here. And the way to go over here is just not giving a damn what people think. Like, that's the reality of thing. If you become homeless tomorrow, if you're 20 years old, who gives a rat's ass? Everyone in their 20s is homeless. Like,
Yeah.
like if you're 30, like, okay, well, yeah, now you have a little more responsibility. But if you don't have shit, what's the difference if you still don't have shit? You know, if you're 40, yes, it's more risky because now you have a family, but now your family doesn't have shit. It's like, what's the risk here? Well, people get so scared of risk. It's like, dude, if there's no risk, there's no reward. At the end of the day, that's the key. No risk, no reward.
I love that, man. I think everyone wants it too. Everyone hopes that they'll become successful and hopes that they can have, the cars or this and that. But not a lot of people are actually in the right vehicle that will help them get there, is what I've definitely seen. I've even seen that myself. So that is so valuable. And there's
Yep.
a lot there.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is just it's easy to say it. It's easy to say, oh yeah, you got to do risky things, but it's the reality. It's the reality of things. People get what they deserve. And all these people think like, oh, but the rich people have more. It's like, yes, they are rich. Obviously, some people do get it from their parents and whatnot. But you can't tell me a CEO. I think the average CEO reads 65 books a year, okay? While you're sitting there and watching Netflix. Like, they're running a company. They have all the stress in the world. They have to deal with so much more shit than you do, and you're stressed and go home and watch Netflix. Okay, well, guess who's going to get paid the salary of just a normal salary? Like, you can't expect to get paid what a CEO makes if you're putting no value out to the world. You get paid for the value you provide. At the end of the day, that's what you get paid. And if you don't provide any value, there's no money to be brought back to you. Like, if the only thing you do is, and it's not saying it's bad. I honestly, if I would tell you the truth, I wish I could not have the mind that I have where I want something more and more. I always want more. I wish I could say, you know what, if I make $50,000 a year, I'll be happy. I wish I could do that, because the people that can do that, I admire, because they're happy where they're at. And that's not to say that's bad. I'm okay with you being that way. But once you start opening your mouth and start complaining, that's where I have an issue. Once that complaint comes out, then you're not happy where you are. So why the hell are you still where you're at? Right?
Yeah.
So that's the key is if you are happy where you're at, don't complain.
That's huge. Man, thank you. There's been so much here. I'm fired up. And I think before I let you go too, I mean, a lot of things that you're talking about they're aligned with, I mean, you came to the States with like $1,000, at 19, 20 years old, whatever you were at. I mean, I bet if you would have looked at you now, like bunch of followers on Instagram, the cars, like being in a helicopter, rubbing shoulders with some of the most successful people that I've seen online, whatever, I'm sure that you would think like, that's crazy. Like there's such a gap between where you were coming over to the US to where you are now. Like, is there anything that you would have told yourself back then? Would you even believe that? Like, is there anything that you would have said to yourself that maybe would have helped you to get to where you're at sooner?
So I'm so messed up in the brain that thinking about this, honestly, yes, I'm proud of where I'm at and I'm proud of who I've become, and I'm surprised I've been able to do what I've been able to do in a very short period of time. But I thought I was going to be way more successful than I am. To tell you the truth, I thought I was going to be way more successful. My goal was to have about $5 million by the time I was 30 years old. I turned 30 this year. And I am nowhere close to have $5 million. So
Wow.
to tell you the truth, I am happy. I'm happy with what I've achieved. Again, it's all about perspective. It's all about perspective. A lot of people see me and they're like, holy shit, this guy has achieved a lot and he's done. And I look at me and I'm like, yes, I've achieved a lot, but I know I have a lot more to achieve, you know? And so I'm always hungry. I do not stop. And once I get to 5-10 million, I'll want 20-50 million. Once I get to 50 million, I want 100 million. So that's just me. I'm just hungry and I love the process. And that's what makes me happy, is basically just grinding it out until I achieve my goal. And once I achieve my goal, I look back and I'm like, holy shit, I've done a lot, but what else can I do? Right. And so I think for me, one thing that I would tell myself is be patient. Things happen for a reason. And if you put yourself in the place where you will allow yourself things happen to you, they will eventually come, but you need to work towards that goal. And it's not going to come for free. It's going to cost something. And that something could be mental peace. It could be mental health. It could be your marriage. It could be your kids. There's always a cost to everything. It's called, it's a law of what's Newton's law. It's a cause and reaction, or I don't know what it is, but there's always a reaction to what you do. And the reaction that will happen, either good or bad, there will always be a reaction. So one thing for me, it's so crazy. Keaton, I didn't know Keaton. I didn't know who he was. Nothing. I had no clue who he was. My brother did, because he followed them on Instagram and stuff, and he knew a lot more about them. We met them at a restaurant one day, and my brother was like, "Oh, that's the Diesel Brothers," and I was like, "I don't know who they are, but cool, okay." And then I met them at an airport one time, and I was probably in my early 20s, probably 22, 23. I was broke. I didn't have money. I was going on a trip to Mexico or something, and I took a picture with them, with Heavy D and with Diesel Dave. And I took a picture with them, and years later, 5 to 8 years later, I messaged Keaton one time on Instagram. I told him, hey, I see you're doing some stuff online, whatever. And he's like, hey, yeah, dude, I like your page, blah, blah. And we just started talking. He's like, hey, do you want to hop on a jet tomorrow and go to New Jersey?
No way.
Sure. Like when, what time? Like he's like, meet me at the airport at this time and we'll go. So I literally just hop on a jet with Keaton, Diesel Dave, with Ryan, the CEO or previous CEO of Limitless. It just life changing, and the person I've become after I did that trip has changed a lot. I thought I was in a good position at that time. I thought I was like, okay, I'm successful and blah blah blah. Once I met them, I was like, holy shit, I haven't done anything. And so again, it's changing the perspective. In one thing that Keaton told me, and this is, I'll just end with this. One thing Keaton told me one time is, I think on the jet, on our way back, I was talking with him and I said, he's like, how much money do you make? And I told him how much money I make. And I was like, but that's pretty good because the average person makes this, right? And he's like, are you average? And I was like, no. He's like, why the fuck are you comparing yourself with average people? And so that really stuck with me. I was like, oh, so I shouldn't compare myself to average people. I should stop doing that. And I should stop saying, oh, well, the average person makes 50,000 and I make 200,000. So I make really good money. I make 3 times what the average person makes. It's like, well, yeah, but What does the above average person make? 500,000. So you're nowhere near what that person makes. So you are nowhere close where you need to be, right?
Wow.
So I think that was very powerful, and that's when my mental perspective changed. Just stop comparing myself to average people, because I'm not average, and if I don't want to be average, I need to compare myself with above average people, and that's when you start leveling up.
Jeez, that frame of reference, that's what I've had to change too. Of like, I used to think $100,000 a year, that's rich. Like, if I could get there, I'm set. Versus, okay, like now you see that there's just so many other levels. There's people doing huge things. There's a lot I've learned from this podcast. I'm gonna have to rewatch this. I hope everyone's kind of taking notes and doing these things, so it's not just like the fluff of saying it just for the sake of saying it. I mean, there's a lot to learn from here. I appreciate your time, and this has just been huge.
Yeah, man, more than happy to come on and help. And if anyone wants to follow me, it's at Steve Arbitrage on Instagram. I don't post a bunch. I'm not an internet guru. I'm not that's not what I try to do. Honestly, I'm not trying to be famous or anything like that. I just post to motivate people, and that's pretty much what I do. Is I just try to motivate people to get the hell out of their routine and get out of their daily shithole that they're in, and honestly just tell people my story. And you don't need to live the way you're living. There's way more to life than going to 9 to 5 working and living a shit life. Like, there's way more than that out there. And you start realizing this once you start following these people, like Keaton flying helicopters, jumping out of helicopters into his own pool. Like, we went to Arizona on the helicopter. We flew 4 hours from Utah to Arizona to an event to meet what was the football player that
There
was
was
there?
Tim Tebow there. I
Tim
mean, Pace Morby
Tebow.
showed up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's like, meet all these people, and you start realizing there's a lot. Even on our flight to Arizona, we stopped at the villa of the person who does the merchant transactions for Costco. And you start realizing that there's a lot of money out
Wow.
there. And he had a villa. Basically, it was huge. It was a compound, okay? And we flew into his house, and you start realizing, like, the things that they're doing, the experiences they're having. Instead of building resentment and hating those people because they have more than you, why don't you go for that? Like, why don't you, even if you can touch a little bit of that, why would you live the life that you're living and resent someone your whole life? You got to think about this. Yeah, I don't know what your religious thoughts are, or what you believe in, if there's an afterlife or not, but just think for a second, what if there's not an afterlife? Why am I living this life, the only life I have, as a shitty life, and hate people and be negative, instead of just working hard to have a better life? Like, you live in the best country in the world. You live in America. There's no other better country to live in. There's no other place you can store your money in. There's no other place to, like, if I were to ask you, if you had a $5 million building, where would you like to own it? In Nigeria or in the United States? In France or in the United States? In Germany or in the United States, right? So you already are one step ahead. You got lucky. God put you in this place. You were lucky enough to live in America, just to be born in America, and you're still living a shit life. Something to think about.
Wow. Yeah, it's a golden ticket. I think we don't realize. I mean, thank you for sharing your experiences and sharing what you've been able to accomplish, which by all means of average is just extraordinary. And knowing that there's so many people out there that have the leg up on you of like, hey, my parents were able to help me out. I started with a good job, a better job. I mean, it is just limitless what you can do. Thank you for sharing that with the audience and sharing what's possible, changing the frame of reference.
Yep, for sure, man.
I appreciate you guys. Go find him if you have questions about Airbnb. I think you're definitely the guy. I know you have a course that compared to everyone else is not not expensive. I know you're not trying to gouge people, but you have a lot of value to add. So, Steven,
Yeah,
again,
for sure. And again, if you guys have questions or anything, want to reach out to me personally, I'm on Instagram. You can reach out to me. I offer mentorships, and like if you have questions about business in general, if you want to start a business, I can coach you during that process. I've started multiple companies. Again, something that most people don't accept is, has your company failed? Yes, I've had companies fail, and I've had companies that do very well. So I know both sides of the spectrum, and most gurus don't accept failure. They always say that they're super successful and they've never failed. But I'm not trying to be a guru. I just try to help people. So that's pretty much it for me. And I appreciate you having me on, Alex.
thank you. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in.